I have very bad eyesight. Therefore, I warn you, if at times I had to, again, start the sentence again. But I told my ophthalmologist, I said, Doctor, we have worked together for 12 years. I still can't write and read. So now I need you to pray for me. When you ask the doctor to pray for you, then he must think there is something wrong with your head. He said, what do I do? I said, just pray that my insight remains intact, because then I can deal with problems of sight. There is something called insight, far more important than all our intellectual and academic glories. And therefore, I remember a cartoon. This professor arrived at the gates of heaven. It's Christian, but could apply to any religion. And St. Peter looked at him and said, welcome, who are you? He said, I'm Professor so-and-so, and I have brought my books, my papers, my achievement for you to see, and I want to enter. He looked at him and he said, Professor, in this place, we are not interested in the quality of your scholarship. All we're interested in the quality of your life. The dignity starts there, really. It may be permitted, I should like to begin, if I may be permitted, I should like to begin my remarks with a brief description of my personal background, because doing so will help express my approach to exploring the theme of human dignity. I come from an Arab background, and therefore the word dignity, as Dr. Shibli Talhami knows very well, and he will be exploring this, so I won't trespass on his territory. Karama is a very special word. It has one meaning that neither Latin, nor French, nor English has: generosity. It is the root. And I think in the final analysis, it is the generosity of the spirit, the mind, of the heart that I'm talking about. During my childhood and youth, in what was then the British Mandate of Palestine, I studied the Holy Quran and the culture of Arabic civilization. Later, as an Arab student enrolled in an English university, I pursued advanced studies in Anglo-Irish literature and English literature. From an early age then, I was immersed in two cultural traditions, and this dual perspective helped inculcate within me a pluralistic perspective that has profoundly shaped my worldview. Subsequently, for more than 6 decades now, I have been engrossed in the study and teaching of the humanities at university level, and so have dedicated my career to exploring the cultural and spiritual influences that shape society. One of the greatest blessings of my life is I married an Italian lady from an Italian background, Catholic background, and we've been married for the last 58 years. The relationship is based on the recognition of each other's dignity. In word, in deed, in action, in gesture, even in the way you look at each other. My guiding belief is the unity and diversity of humanity. And this conviction, driven from three sources of insight, namely my personal background and experiences, my life's work, and the foundational teaching of my faith. I belong to the Baha'i faith, which does not in any way give me any idea that I'm distinguished from anyone else. This is a path. We all follow a path. That path leads to one place, no matter what you believe in. That ultimate reality, nobody can define it, Nobody can explain it. It is there, and no matter how we in the universities are so clever and intelligent, we will never be able to know what that is. Agreed? Of course. Unless someone else can define it. These three wellsprings of wisdom, the personal, the professional, and the spiritual, each suggest to me that one of the greatest challenges of humanity, that humanity faces today, is defining and applying the principle of human dignity. Furthermore, I believe that such a principle could serve as a potent tool for enhancing intercultural understanding and harmony amid a world order characterized by growing diversity and complexity. I must add, I spent from 1968 to 1986 as a professor at the American University of Beirut. My closest colleague was Charles Malik. We both were professors at that university, and Charles Malik became a very close friend. He opened his many papers on human rights, and we talked a great deal. And he was an outstanding man of great vision. I knew him, I had the honor to work with him, I've read his papers, and I have benefited from that enormously. In the remarks that follow, I shall suggest how the international community might move towards a principle of human dignity by first defining what this is, second, stating some reasons why it is needed, and third, indicating how one might be fashioned. What is a principle of human dignity? Challenged by the question, what is a principle of human dignity, perhaps it might be appropriate to begin forming an answer by examining what a principle is. In his memoirs published in the late 1950s, the British diplomat Robert Vansittart offered an implied definition by way of contrast. Regarding President Woodrow Wilson's most enduring contribution to the rhetoric and substance of international relations, Vansittart wrote, "Self-determination is not a principle, but a practice, to be applied with discrimination." From this perspective, principles are fixed truths of universal validity and applicability. They lack the malleability of meaning and the inconsistency of action that so often characterize policies and even doctrines. What do we mean by the expression human dignity? In the 21st century, in an age of global interdependence, every civilization, every culture, every society, every community, every institution, and indeed every individual should enjoy the right and ability to articulate an understanding of this highly evocative term. Perhaps it would not be going too far to declare that we all labor under an obligation to do so. For its part, the United Nations has given us one of the most important secular articulations of human dignity. It is found in the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which espouses a profound belief in the dignity and worth of the human person. The Declaration's preamble asserts recognition of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. A few years after the Universal Declaration was proclaimed, the Swedish diplomat and UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld offered another meaning of human dignity. In a 1956 address entitled "The International Significance of the United States Bill of Rights," Hammarskjöld said, "Recognition of human dignity means to give others freedom from fear." And I'm sure that Dr. Talhami will be talking about this in respect of the Arab Spring. If Hammarskjöld's universal and other directed definitions is widely accepted and applied as principle of human dignity, then it will create a vast reciprocal web of responsibility that could humanize and civilize the world and at all levels: family, community, nation, and international society. Another way of saying that the principle of human dignity can help create a vast reciprocal web of responsibility is that it can help engender a new culture, namely a culture of peace. The concept of culture, like that of dignity, has many meanings and permutations. Half a century ago, my colleague Professor L.F. Brosnahan, we were both teaching at the University of Berlin in Nigeria, and his colleague J.W. Spencer offered a definition of culture that still resonates today. This is their definition. The word culture, as it is used by the social anthropologists, refers to the total complex of modes of acting, of ways of thinking, and of habits of speaking, which are characteristic of a community, and to the products or results of those ways of thinking and acting, namely the ideas, the beliefs, the perceptions of that community, and what the anthropologists call the institutions that they have built up, that is, the religions, the forms of government and administration, the agricultural system, the language, and so on. In short, by the culture of the community, we mean all the learned and shared activities of that community and the results of such activities. In the discussion of culture, Brosnahan and Spencer focus on key elements that could help activate the principle of human dignity and make it into much more than a convenient catchphrase of political sloganeering. Specifically, they mention modes of acting, ways of thinking, habits of speaking. These factors, acting, thinking, and speaking, are perhaps what Dag Hammarskjöld had in mind when he declared recognition of human dignity cannot be simply a question of passive acceptance. It is a question, he emphasizes, of the positive action that must be taken in order to kill fear. In the 21st century, we must discover ways and means of utilizing a principle of human dignity to banish fear itself. In the process of moving from an age of mutual fear to an era of reciprocal dignity, the question of justice looms large, for individuals and groups will never be liberated from fear without fair systems and standards of justice. There is an Arabic saying, ثلاثة تصل الملك العدل والرأفة والجود. Three things guarantee dominion: generosity, justice, and compassion. applies really everywhere, really, to any kind of authority, including professorial authorities. In order to transform a principle of human dignity from an abstraction into a reality, the establishment of universal standards of justice is a preeminent concern, for justice is essential basis of unity. Without unity, there can be no peace. The construction of a peaceful global society is a progressive task. First, justice is established. Second, unity is realized. Finally, peace prevails. This process cannot be reconfigured or reversed, and at each of the three stages, a functional principle of human dignity, in Hammarskjöld's sense, is essential. Then, why is the principle of human dignity needed? Having defined the principle of human dignity and having noted its relation to justice, I should now like to share some thoughts on why such a principle is needed today in today's world. The first reason we need a principle of human dignity is because thinking deeply about principles of peace is a necessary prelude to actions of peace. As the German analyst Karl Kaiser has said, policy always begins with concepts and words. Here perhaps we should remind those of us who believe in the Bible, at the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's why the use of words is a sacred responsibility. It is in Arabic literature because of its relationship to the Holy Quran. To be sure, practical steps to ensure material well-being and physical security are essential to achieving peace. But no less necessary is building peace on the level of the inner self. The importance of principles to peacemaking is captured in the following lines taken from a statement called The Promise of World Peace, issued in 1985 by the Universal House of Justice, the governing authority of the Baha'i international community. This is the passage. The primary challenge in dealing with issues of peace is to raise the context to the level of principle, as distinct from pure pragmatism. For in essence, peace stems from an inner state, supported by a spiritual or moral attitude. And it is chiefly in evoking this attitude that the possibility of enduring solutions can be found. If a principle of human dignity can help place the issues of dignity on the international agenda, then we can all acquire a more subtle and therefore comprehensive understanding of current events and future developments. And a principle of human dignity can serve the cause of knowledge in another broader fashion. In his 2011 book, The Social Animal, published in New York by the New York Times, the columnist David Brooks writes the following. I'm talking to the students, so please, students, pay attention to this. I beg you. The rationalism method has yielded many great discoveries, but when it is used to explain or organize the human world, it does have one core limitation. It highly values conscious cognition, what you might call level 2 cognition, which can see, quantify, formalize, and understand. But it is blind to the influence of unconscious, what you might call level 1 cognition, which is cloud-like, non-linear, hard to see, and impossible to formalize. Rationalists have a tendency to lop off or diminish all information that is not calculable according to their methodologies. I don't want to be unfair. There are people who don't, of course, accept this idea, but I have heard it from some of my colleagues say, you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't quantify it, it does not exist. Question is, what about love? How do you quantify it? How do you judge decency, honesty, truth? These are basic. Our survival depends on these. Yes, these you can judge only by their manifestation. I can tell you, the greatest love in this world is when my wife touches my cheek and says, you look tired, darling. That's his love. She doesn't have to draw me a graph. It is the influence of these ideas translated into action when it touches our heart that really make a lot of difference. A final reason a principle of human dignity is needed is this. It can help us imagine new perspectives for looking at our world and new ways of diagnosing its myriad problems and challenges. In his 1990 book, Eunomia, a Greek word denoting the smooth and harmonious ordering of society, the international law expert Philip Allott argues the need for a new model upon which to fashion an international society. How much more time do I have? About 5 minutes. Oh, okay, I don't need more than that. He writes, it is impossible to imagine a world completely free of war, or is it? In an age when the search for peaceful cohabitation between nations of the world has taken on a new and vibrant urgency, when what is needed is a model for which to fashion an international society that will hold firm in peace for generations to come. The tragic truth is that the ambitions of 20th century peacemakers have been thwarted by a system of international diplomacy which mocks the ideas of peace. Generations of children are being brought up to believe that there are no rational societal processes beyond the seemingly natural processes of politics, no values of truth and justice beyond the seemingly natural values of the marketplace. Yet, while scientists and politicians struggle to find solutions to the grave threats now facing our environment, not enough is being done to ensure that we secure the future of international society from the threats of war and economic collapse. I met Philip Allott at Oxford, where I was teaching between 1974 and 76. A brilliant man, was in the UN, and his idea is, once he said it in a lecture, it's not in my paper and I'm reminded of it here, he quoted the Irish mystical poet A.E., where he spoke about the politics of time and the politics of eternity. And he said, A.E. said, all times, the politics of time must serve the politics of eternity. Now, the politics of eternity obviously are these universal principles that unite us all. One of the major, I think, concepts of dignity, how we can guarantee it, how we can, is in the spiritual traditions of humanity. It goes as follows, from every tradition. From the Hindu tradition, do not to another what is disagreeable to yourself. From the Buddhist, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would be harmful. Zoroastrian, that nature alone is good and shall not be unto another whatever is not good for its own self. The Jewish tradition, what is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. This is the entire law. All the rest is a commentary. The Christian, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in Islam, this is a hadith saying of the Prophet, none of you is a believer until he desires for his brother what he desires for himself. And finally, from the Baha'i writings, blessed is he who prefereth his brother before himself. The golden rule is an obvious starting place for which to explore the wealth of common ground that exists among the religions, beginning with their mutual assertion of shared human dignity. By focusing, if a religion does not recognize human dignity, it is not the religion. It is the interpretation of the blind followers who want to use God to serve their own needs. T.S. Eliot, Murdered in the Cathedral. You should have read that. It's great. It's about serving God or serving yourself. He says, he who serves God runs greater risk of sorrow and sin than him who serves the king, for the great cause he serves may end up serving him. I think I should bring this to, but let's, you heard of the clash of civilizations and the remaking of world order, Samuel Huntington. This is in Samuel Huntington's book. Every critic missed it. Believe me, read all the reviews. This is what he says. As many have pointed out, whatever the degree to which the religions, they divided humankind, the world's major religions, Western Christianity, Orthodoxy, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Confucianism, Taoism, Judaism, also share the key values in common. If humans are ever to develop a universal civilization, it will emerge gradually through the exploration and expansion of these commonalities. That's Huntington, right? So, but it has been completed. I'd like to bring this to an end to save you all this trouble, really. I believe in a great future, but I'm waiting for it to happen. These lines from Matthew Arnold come to mind. I'm wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born. With all our genius, with all the inventions we have made, with all the progress, which I do not deny and I accept, provided it does not enslave me like computers and cell phones and that sort of thing. When you think of all this, you say, all right, where is that? I'm wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born. You know why? We have taken the spiritual element out of the equation. So mind and spirit have to work together, the intellect and the heart. The great minds of men, however, there is a superior eternal reality at work. And let me say this, let me quote at the very end some book. It's, I think, in Isaiah, it's here. Forgive me. There it is. I want to read it and I'll end with that. In the book, in Ecclesiastes, it is written. And I believe, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. Let's hope we're entering a time of peace.